My first mistake was punctuality. People, usually optimists from HR, love to say that arriving early on your first day makes a great impression. That's a lie. It just gives you an extra 5 minutes to stand in the lobby, sweat through your clean shirt, and pretend you're not one step away from a complete mental collapse over a paper jam in the printer. I stood frozen in the lobby of Halden and Rowe Logistics, clutching a coffee I didn't trust and adjusting my brand new ID badge. The building practically screamed expensive competence. Glass walls, mirrored floors, and people who said words like synergy and time management without a trace of irony. I had ended up here by some miracle, surviving multiple circles of humiliating interviews for the position of Junior Operations Coordinator. It sounded impressive. In practice, it meant I'd be cleaning up messes created by people paid 5 times more than me to make them. "You'll be working closely with Nancy," the receptionist smiled at me. At that moment, I nodded politely. I didn't yet know that this name wasn't just a contact in Outlook, but a natural disaster packaged in a designer suit. 4 minutes later, I saw her. Nancy stood by a massive printer that looked like an industrial monolith next to her. My first thought was, she's so tiny. My second, this is not going to help me. She was barely 5 feet tall, dark hair pulled into an immaculate ponytail, silver hoop earrings, and heels so sharp they should have been licensed as weapons. She looked like she could draft my professional obituary before lunch. The manager escorting me smiled too brightly, the kind of smile people give when leaving a danger zone. "Nancy, this is Ethan. He starts today." Nancy slowly turned around. She scanned me from head to toe, not flirtatiously, but more like a mechanic inspecting a questionable part, deciding whether to sue the supplier. "This is him?" she clarified. "Yes," the manager confirmed cheerfully. The silence stretched. I suddenly became aware of every imperfection in my posture. "Taller than I expected," she finally said. Thanks," I managed. "That wasn't a compliment," the manager coughed, muttered something about vendor coordination, and promptly retreated, leaving me alone with this bundle of concentrated fury. "Your badge is crooked," Nancy stated. I automatically reached for my collar, but she beat me to it. Stepping forward, she adjusted the plastic card with 2 precise fingers. The movement lasted a second, but for some reason, my pulse acted as if we'd just survived a parachute jump. "There," she stepped back. "Now you look slightly less lost." Actually, this is me at my peak. Sad. She spun around on her dangerously thin heels and strode rapidly into the depths of the office. I had to practically run to keep up with this small, very angry bird. Nancy led me to an empty desk. Perfect order. Monitor, docking station, a pen lying parallel to the edge of the desk. "This is your spot. It was better before you. You're very hospitable." "No, I'm objective." She leaned her hand on the edge of my desk and pointed at the screen. "Password is in the envelope. Change it immediately. If you leave the default one, I'll know, and whatever respect I have for you will evaporate." Did we skip the "nice to meet you" stage and jump straight to defective software? "Your monitor is tilted at the wrong angle." Before I could object, she adjusted it by 0.5 centimeter. Better now. For the next 20 minutes, she briefed me in the tone of someone explaining bomb disposal to a person who can't be trusted with scissors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard at frightening speed. She knew every macro, every hidden column in the spreadsheet. It was slightly hypnotic. "Don't rename files manually. Ever," she enunciated. "I know how file names work." "You think you know." I leaned back in my chair, studying her profile. "Do you talk to all newbies like this?" "Yes, it filters out the weak." "And if I'm not one of them?" Her eyes narrowed. A spark of excitement lit up in them. We'll find out. It was a challenge, direct and completely unguarded. And since I possess the rare talent of making my life more complicated than it needs to be, I just smiled. That's cute. Nancy froze. The entire department around us seemed to stop breathing. She slowly turned her head toward me. Her voice dropped several degrees below zero. Ethan, remember one thing. I am not cute. I looked at her, tiny, impeccably dressed, and apparently ready to stab me with a whiteboard marker. That's exactly what cute people usually say. In the silence, a muffled groan came from the colleague at the next desk. She just covered her face with her hands. Nancy addressed the audience without taking her eyes off me. If any of you laugh right now, I will forward your entire list of mistakes directly to management. Dead silence again. You have bad instincts, she concluded, looking at me. I get that a lot. And excessive self-confidence. Only in situations where I'm doomed anyway. Something flickered in her face. Not a smile, no, but the ice cracked. A tiny shift in the tectonic plates of her composure. She silently put my pen back in place and walked off to answer a call, leaving me with cold coffee and a clear realization. My first day hadn't introduced me to a colleague. It had introduced me to a problem. A brilliant, insufferable, very tiny problem. And the worst part? I already wanted her to come back and scold me again. By lunch on the third day, I had developed the survival system. It wasn't the most reliable strategy, more like a fragile framework of self-control, built by a man who had suddenly realized that his workday now revolved around a woman who could only reach his chin in a jump, yet somehow managed to look down on him. The rules of the system were simple. Don't react when Nancy says something outrageously sharp. Don't stare when she stands on tiptoes to reach a folder on the top shelf. It's a trap. Under no circumstances, admit to yourself that this dynamic nightmare is starting to grow on me. Of course, on Wednesday at 12:15 p.m., the system failed spectacularly. I stood in the office kitchen, trying to extract my sandwich from its plastic packaging without making it look like evidence from a crime scene. They're in the second drawer, a voice came from behind me. I didn't even need to turn around. That voice had the intonation of someone who had already found your mistake, even if you hadn't done anything yet. I was just about to open it, I lied. No, you were about to open the first drawer, see the spoons, and freeze with a confused look for 3 seconds. I turned. Nancy stood in the doorway, clutching a container of salad and a bottle of expensive mineral water. She wore a navy blue jacket that fit so perfectly, it looked like it had been sewn by perfectionist elves. I'm offended by how plausible that is, I admitted. She walked to the drawer, pulled out a napkin, and handed it to me, as if providing humanitarian aid. Your lunch is terrible. You don't know anything about my lunch. White bread, flavorless supermarket turkey, and a sauce that's 90% preservatives. I know enough. She moved me aside with her shoulder, which wasn't easy given the size difference, but her determination had weight, and opened the cutlery drawer. You're standing in front of the good forks. There are good forks? There are regular ones, and there are thin metal ones that bend under pressure, like weak men. I froze, watching her select a worthy utensil. Did you seriously just say that? Absolutely. She sat down at the small table by the window, alone, and without looking up, she tossed out, "Well?" I looked around. The room was full of people, but no one rushed to sit next to her. Is that for me? I don't usually talk to furniture. I sat across from her, and for a minute, silence reigned. It wasn't awkward, it was concentrated. You peeled the label off the packaging wrong, she observed, looking at my sandwich. I'm trying to understand what emotion that's causing in you. Secondary irritation. Interesting. No, it isn't, she snapped. I smiled, despite my better judgment. You do this on purpose, don't you? Say crazy things with a straight face so people don't know how to react? It's your efficiency strategy? Nancy set down her fork and looked me straight in the eyes for the first time. Her gaze was so precise that I felt like I was under an X-ray. Want the honest version, Ethan? Depends on how hostile it is. It's subjective. You try very hard to seem like one of the guys, relaxed and ironic. But you do it too consciously. You adjust your sleeves every time you're nervous, and you always look at the exits when you enter a room. That suggests either anxiety or an excessive tendency to analyze, most likely both. I froze with a piece of turkey in my hand. Was that a psychological striptease without my consent? That was a rough sketch. You're competent enough to be useful, but not confident enough to just do the work without stupid jokes. And you start flirting when you feel you're losing an argument. The room went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. You're incredible, I managed. That's not a complaint. What if I asked for a sketch of you? I leaned forward. Something changed. A tiny shift. She blinked a fraction of a second slower. Then she picked up her fork again. I don't outsource that task. Sounds lonely. Nancy's head shot up. For a moment, her iron coordinator mask slipped, and underneath, something alive appeared, and very prickly. Eat your sandwich, Ethan. The rest of the day continued in the same rhythm. At 3 p.m., she corrected my email to a supplier, simply rewriting one sentence. Like this, now it doesn't sound like you were raised by overly apologetic robots. At 4:30 p.m., she silently placed a printout of a form on my desk that I hadn't even thought about yet. She was insufferable. But every time she walked past, brushing an invisible speck of dust from my desk, I caught myself waiting for her comments. At 5:10 p.m., the office began to empty. I was trying to beat an Excel spreadsheet that was clearly on the side of evil. Nancy walked past on her way out, stopped, glanced at my monitor, and pressed one key. The formula fixed itself. All the numbers lined up. I turned to her. Couldn't you have done that 5 minutes ago? You didn't ask. That's cruel. It's educational. She put on her coat. It was as impeccable as everything about her. Do you enjoy being so... I hesitated, searching for the word. So what? Complicated. She thought for a second, which was worse than if she'd snapped back immediately. Yes. Unbelievable. Nancy had already reached the elevator when she turned around. Ethan? Yes? Your notebook. What about it? It's not lying parallel to the edge of your desk. It's irritating. And she left. And I remained seated, staring at the notebook, and slowly, very slowly, moved it 1 centimeter closer. The survival system officially ceased to exist. The problem wasn't that she was a tyrant. The problem was that she was damn right. And I already knew that tomorrow morning I'd arrive early again, just to watch her adjust my badge. By Wednesday morning, I had concluded that my brain had officially surrendered. My body had dragged me to the office at 9 a.m. sharp, even though my contract entitled me to an extra 7 minutes of sleep. Nancy was already at her post. She sat at her desk, resembling an expensive figurine carved from dark marble, motionless, cold, and perfectly integrated into the decor. She didn't look up when I sat down next to her, but I would have sworn she'd registered my arrival with millisecond precision. 9:02, she announced into the void. You're deteriorating. I just decided to give you a head start so you wouldn't feel lonely in your perfection. She slowly turned her head. Your badge is crooked at a 3-degree angle again. It's my way of protesting the system. It's your way of looking like someone who can't handle the laws of gravity. The real catastrophe happened at 11. We had a meeting in the conference room about a delayed shipment from Shanghai. There were about 8 people in the room, including Martin, our boss, who looked at charts as if they were his suicide note. Nancy stood at the whiteboard. She wore a white blouse and a black pencil skirt, a stylus in her hand, looking like an admiral planning an invasion. She dismantled the purchasing department's arguments with such surgical precision that I almost felt sorry for them. If we don't recalculate the logistics lead time by lunch, she enunciated, the company will lose 2% margin simply because you don't know how to use a calendar. Martin nodded, and the guy from purchasing tried to object. Nancy, it's just a 48-hour delay. She slowly shifted her gaze to him. The room grew noticeably colder. Just 48 hours is the difference between profit and a lawsuit. If your brain can't grasp this concept, perhaps you should look for work in a field where time doesn't matter. Geology, for example. She reached up to the top of the whiteboard to write a number, and to do so, she had to stand on the very tips of her lethal stilettos. Her ponytail swayed, and her face expressed such focused rage at her own height that my self-preservation filter simply shut off. God, I blurted out to the entire room. You're so cute when you're trying to look fierce. At Halden and Rowe Logistics, a silence fell that could have been used to study the sounds of space. Martin stopped breathing. Layla, sitting next to me, slowly covered her face with her hands, like someone who had just witnessed a guillotine drop. Nancy slowly, very slowly, lowered herself back onto her full feet. She turned to me. Her eyes were like 2 lasers set to atom-splitting mode. What did you say? Her voice was quiet, like the rustle of a snake in the grass. I realized the bridge behind me was blown, so I decided to go all the way. I said you're adorable in this little general role of yours. All that righteous anger, it's really... I paused, searching for the word. Touching. Nancy placed the stylus on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. Ethan, she said, come to my office after the meeting. You don't have an office, Nancy. We have an open plan. Then we'll find a place where no one will hear your apologies before I destroy you. 5 minutes later, we stood in a narrow aisle between shelves in the storage room. Nancy was breathing rapidly, her cheeks flushed, and I wasn't sure if it was from anger or something else. Do you have any idea what you've done? She advanced on me, forcing me to back into the shelves. You've undermined my authority in front of the entire department. Cute? Touching? I've been managing this chaos for 3 years. People here are afraid of my shadow. I stopped with my back against a folder of 2022 invoices. Nancy stood close, tilting her head back to look me in the eyes. They're afraid of you because you won't let them see anything but your spreadsheets, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Because that's the job. No, because you're afraid that if you stop being Iron Nancy, everything will fall apart. Nothing will fall apart, she jabbed a finger into my chest. But you crossed the line. I looked at her hand, then back at her face. One strand of hair had escaped her perfect ponytail. I reached out and tucked it behind her ear. Nancy froze. Her angry tirade stopped mid-sentence. You have very bad instincts, Ethan, she whispered, but didn't pull away. We've already established that. I'm serious. You can't just come in here and call me that. What, cute? Yes. But it's true. She closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, that icy certainty was gone. It disrupts my work, because now I'm thinking about the fact that you said it, and that Layla heard it, and that you... She didn't finish. She just turned and walked away, throwing over her shoulder, I want the Shanghai report on my desk in 10 minutes. No jokes, no emojis, and for heaven's sake, Ethan, fix your badge. I stayed standing in the dusty storage room, inhaling the smell of old paper and her perfume. I was terrified. I was delighted. And I knew for sure that tomorrow I'd call her cute again. Just because, at that moment, for a second, she stopped being efficient and became real. Thursday started with me discovering a stack of documents as thick as War and Peace on my desk, and on top of it, a small neon sticky note written in perfect calligraphy. Since you have so much free time for compliments, I found you something to do. Reconciliation of invoices for the southern region for the past 2 years. Deadline, tomorrow. Good luck, soldier. I looked at Nancy. She didn't even turn her head in my direction. She was typing so fast that the keyboard looked like it might start smoking. Her entire demeanor radiated cold, professional focus. This was revenge. Sophisticated, bureaucratic, and absolutely her style. All day, Nancy applied a scorched earth tactic toward me. But it was a strange tactic. She didn't ignore me. On the contrary, she was present in my life every second, turning my workday into an obstacle course for my nervous system. At 2 p.m, when I was drowning in numbers, she came to my desk. Instead of just pointing out the mistake, she leaned over my shoulder. Too close. I caught the subtle scent of her perfume, something like bitter orange and fresh cotton. Line 48 has a typo, she whispered directly into my ear. Her breath touched my skin, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. I'll check, I managed, trying not to look at her lips. Do that, and fix the angle of your monitor. You're sitting like a question mark again. She didn't leave immediately. She stayed standing nearby, pretending to study my chart, while I frantically tried to click the cursor into the right cell. You're doing this on purpose, I said, unable to take it anymore. Doing what? Helping you not embarrass yourself in front of the finance department? She straightened up and looked at me with an innocent expression that sparkled with pure mischief. You're using your cuteness as a weapon of mass destruction. That's unfair. I'm not cute, Ethan. I'm efficient. And right now, my efficiency is directed at making sure you finish this report before you run out of energy for sarcasm. Layla, who had been watching this scene while hiding behind a mug of tea, later intercepted me at the printer. You know, she whispered, the whole office is placing bets. On what, when she fires me? No, on which of you will break first. Either you'll kiss her right in a meeting, or she'll hit you with a stapler. But honestly, the kiss seems more likely. She throws sparks when she looks at you. Those are sparks of hatred, Layla. Honey, if that's hatred, then I'm a prima ballerina. She's never looked at anyone like that. She usually looks at people like they're obstacles, but you're like an interesting problem. By 6 p.m, the office was empty. Only we remained. The silence was broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the steady tapping of keys. I finished the report. My hands were shaking, my eyes were burning, but I'd done it. I stood up, walked to her desk, and placed the folder in front of her. Done. The southern region has surrendered. Nancy looked up at me. She looked tired. Her perfect bun was slightly disheveled, and there was a mark on the bridge of her nose from the glasses she'd taken off a minute ago. At that moment, she wasn't the tiny tyrant. She was just Nancy. You worked fast, she said, and for the first time all day, there was no ice in her voice. I really wanted to impress my commander. She smirked, genuinely, without sarcasm. It was a quiet, almost gentle smile. Ethan? Yes? You have a coffee stain on your cuff. God, can't you ever just stay quiet? No, I'm your curse. She stood up, walked over to me, and suddenly pulled me by the sleeve toward the sink in the corner of the kitchen. She wet a napkin and began carefully rubbing out the stain. We stood in the half-darkness of the empty office. Her hands were small, cool, and frighteningly confident. I looked at the top of her head, at how intently she frowned while fighting the stain on my shirt. Nancy, I called quietly. What? She didn't look up. Thank you for everything. She froze. The napkin stopped on my sleeve. A second stretched into an eternity. She slowly raised her head. The distance between us had shrunk to critical. I could see every eyelash, feel her quickening breath. "Don't make me regret not firing you on the first day," she whispered. At that moment, my phone rang. Loudly, unceremoniously, shattering the magic into pieces. It was Owen. Nancy instantly pulled away, adjusting her jacket. "Go home, Ethan. Tomorrow at 9. And try to..." She hesitated. "Just try not to be late." I stepped outside, inhaling the cool evening air. My heart was beating as if I'd just run a marathon. Tomorrow was Friday night, and I knew that our mutual destabilizations were just beginning. Friday at Halden and Rowe Logistics always resembled an evacuation from a sinking ship. By 4 in the afternoon, the office vibrated with impatience, and by 5, the space emptied with such speed that someone might have announced a drill. Nancy, of course, hadn't moved. She sat, eyes fixed on her monitor, methodically checking items off her endless to-do list. Her back was as straight as a linear regression, and her face expressed absolute inaccessibility. She was clearly trying to erase yesterday's scene with the napkin and coffee stain from her memory. I realized I needed to act quickly and by her rules, which meant through logic and efficiency. I walked to her desk and without a word, placed a piece of paper with an address in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, not looking up. "A deficit." She finally looked at me, raising a perfectly calibrated eyebrow. "A deficit of what?" "Quality alcohol and decent forks in your system. I found a place where the decor is symmetrical and the cocktail menu was designed by someone with OCD. You'll like it." Nancy slowly closed her laptop. "That sounds like a date invitation, Ethan. And dates between colleagues are inefficient, risky, and lead to chaos in reporting." "It's not a date," I leaned against the partition. "It's an off-site briefing on interpersonal communication. Purely a post-mortem. You love correcting mistakes, don't you?" She was silent for 3 seconds. 5. 7:30, she snapped. "And if they have bendable forks, I'm firing you on Monday." The bar was called The Archive. Inside, everything was dark wood, rows of shelves reaching the ceiling, and dim lighting. The perfect place for secret conspiracies or very bad decisions. Nancy arrived at exactly 7:30 p.m. She wore a dark gray dress and those same stilettos. She looked so flawless that the couple at the next table involuntarily straightened their backs, sensing her aura of discipline. "You're 40 seconds late," she said instead of hello, sliding onto a high stool. "I was testing your endurance." "It's steel. Order." The next hour was the strangest of my life. We sat in the half-darkness, and Nancy began analyzing the bar. She evaluated the speed of service, the ergonomics of the bar counter, and even the precise amount of ice the bartender put in each glass. "You even relax according to state standards," I observed, watching her sip her martini. "I just don't see the point in unsystematic consumption." She looked at me over the rim of her glass. In the candlelight, her gaze seemed softer, but still just as perceptive. "Why are you still here, Ethan?" "In the bar? Because the cocktail's good." "No, at the company. After the first week with me, most coordinators transfer to the packaging department. Less stress, and I'm not there." I set my glass down on the table. Maybe I like risk. Or maybe I'm just waiting for the moment when you stop testing my instincts and start trusting them. "Trust is a variable that can't be controlled," she said quietly. "Nancy, you're in a bar right now, not in a meeting. Turn off your inner dictator for at least one evening." She took a generous sip, and I saw her shoulders finally drop just a little. "It's hard," she admitted. "When you're 5 feet tall, you have to build a fortress around yourself so people don't mistake you for office furniture. You're the last person anyone would mistake for furniture. You're a natural disaster." "Is that a compliment?" It's a fact. We talked until closing. I learned that she hates karaoke and loves chess. She learned that I know how to listen when I'm not trying to make a joke every second. When we stepped outside, the night city hit us with cool air. We stood by the entrance, and the distance between us began to close again on its own. Nancy looked up at me, and her eyes no longer held an inventory. "Do you still think I'm cute?" she whispered. "Worse." I touched her hand. "I think you're irreplaceable." She didn't have time to answer. 3 guys emerged from the dark alley, clearly not in the mood for philosophical conversation. "Whoa," one of them said, glancing at my height and Nancy's tiny frame. "Nice couple. Got any spare change for the party?" I felt Nancy tense. But before I could step forward to shield her, she stepped half a pace ahead herself. "Young man," her voice sounded as if she were scolding an intern for missing a deadline. "Your extortion strategy is inefficient. Your location violates public order, and your tone suggests you haven't assessed the risks. You have 3 seconds to reorganize your priorities and disappear from my field of vision." The guys froze. They had expected fear, screams, anything, but not a crisis management lecture from a woman who barely reached their chests. "Hey, what are you yapping about, little one?" one of them snapped out of it. Nancy didn't even blink. 1, 2... I put my hand on her shoulder, letting her know I was there, but she only gripped her fingers tighter. Her gaze held so much icy confidence that the guys actually hesitated. Apparently, primal instinct told them, if such a tiny creature is calmly talking back to your face, either she has an army behind her, or a complete absence of fear of death. They chose not to find out. Grumbling something about crazy people, the group disappeared into the night. I looked at Nancy. She adjusted her jacket and took a deep breath. 3, she finished in a whisper. "God, you really are insane." I couldn't help smiling. "You just tried to optimize hooligans." "They were disrupting the rhythm of my evening." She looked at me, and I saw that her hands were trembling slightly after all. I couldn't help myself. I cupped her face in my hands and kissed her right there, under the streetlight. It was a kiss with nothing efficient, proper, or logical about it. It was pure chaos. And Nancy responded with such force that all her steel composure turned into molten metal in an instant. Monday at the office began with me discovering a cup of coffee and a perfectly ironed spare shirt on my desk. Next to them lay a note. "This one has no stains. Don't disappoint me before lunch." Nancy sat at her desk, buried in her monitor. She wore a navy blue dress buttoned all the way up and looked as if the kiss by the bar had been a figment of my imagination, or a server error. But I noticed she'd been typing the same line for 3 minutes. Hiding the radiation levels sparking between us was impossible. The first to figure it out was Layla. She approached us with the look of someone who'd won the lottery. "Guys, I don't want to harsh your efficiency," she whispered, leaning on my desk, "but Ethan is glowing like a Christmas tree, and Nancy just missed 3 typos in the name of a port. That's either love or toxic waste leakage." "Layla," Nancy looked up, and her gaze could have frozen an ocean. "If you don't get back to your invoices right now, I will personally optimize your workspace to the dimensions of a hallway stool." "Oh, okay. Layla raised her hands. "But know this, the entire purchasing department now owes me $5 each." When she left, I turned to Nancy. "You missed typos? That's serious. Looks like I really am becoming a critical error for you." "You're a hindrance," she snapped, but I saw the faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "But I might be ready to reconsider my priorities." If I thought Nancy was the pinnacle of strictness, I was wrong. The pinnacle was her sister Mara. We sat in her minimalist living room. Mara, tall and stately, looked at me as if I were the defendant in a case of embezzling government property. She was a lawyer and, apparently, spent her free time on the Inquisition. So, Ethan, she began, stirring her tea with such precision that not a single drop touched the sides of the cup. Nancy says you're useful. She usually uses that word for reliable staplers. Why should I believe you'll last longer than the warranty period on office equipment? Nancy tensed. I felt her squeeze my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold. Because I'm the only one who isn't afraid to call her cute when she's trying to execute me, I answered, looking Mara straight in the eye. And because underneath all that structural integrity, I saw a person who cares more about the company's margin than her own sleep. I'm not looking for convenience, Mara. I'm looking for someone who will test my instincts every day. Mara was silent for a long 10 seconds. Then she looked at Nancy, who looked ready to sink through the floor with embarrassment. His rhetoric isn't bad, Mara stated. Fine, live. But if you upset her, I'll arrange your disappearance so legally clean that even your dog will forget your name. A year passed. The Halden and Rowe logistics office got used to Nancy fixing my tie before important calls, and me bringing her tea exactly 5 minutes before she started to boil over. We'd become a legend. They called us the 1.50 tandem, though I preferred the term power couple. On our anniversary, I invited her to the same bar, the Archive, but this time I came prepared. Nancy, I said when our cocktails arrived, I conducted an audit of my life over the past year. And what are the results? She raised an eyebrow, sipping her martini. The results are concerning. A massive breach has been found in my long-term planning. I have no document confirming that you'll be correcting my mistakes until the end of my days. I took out a small box. The ring inside was simple, elegant, and, by all of Nancy's standards, perfectly symmetrical. Ethan, she whispered. Her eyes, usually so dry and businesslike, glistened with tears. This is completely against protocol. We didn't have prior approval. Override protocol. Will you marry me, Nancy? Approve this volatile variable. She looked at the ring for a long time, then at me. Your proposal has flaws, she said, her voice trembling. You didn't specify deadlines or penalties for non-compliance. But I think I'm ready to sign this contract. I slipped the ring onto her tiny finger. Yes, I clarified. Yes, you impossible man, yes. The wedding was a model of logistics. Nancy personally drew up the guest arrival schedule to the minute. Martin admitted at the reception that it was the most efficient event of his life. That evening, when we were alone, Nancy sat on the edge of the bed, taking off her famous stilettos. You know, Ethan, she said, looking at me, your badge was crooked at the wedding, too. That was my final act of civil disobedience. I put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, my tiny, prickly, brilliant tyrant. She had changed my world, rearranged all the furniture, and made me become the best version of myself. I love you, Nancy. I know, she replied, closing her eyes. I logged that fact in the first week. But she reached up and kissed my chin. I love you too. And it's the only error in my calculations I don't intend to fix. If you thought Nancy invented perfectionism, you were wrong. She just inherited it, along with the family silver and an inability to forgive typos. Celeste, Nancy's mother, lived in a house that looked like it was sterilized daily and leveled with laser precision. Even the bushes in the garden were such perfect geometric shapes that birds probably had to file flight plans for landing. Listen carefully, Nancy whispered as we stood at the massive oak door. She'd been adjusting my tie for the 6th time in the last 3 minutes. Don't say approximately. Don't use the word fine. And for God's sake, don't try to joke about her height. She doesn't appreciate it. Nancy, you're scaring me, I caught her hands. Are we going to dinner or to Special Forces qualification? Ethan, my mother considers chaos a personal insult. And you, she glanced at my slightly rumpled, by her standards, face. To her, you look like walking chaos. The door opened. Celeste was an exact copy of Nancy, but in a limited edition version. An impeccable gray suit, not a single hair out of place, and a gaze capable of taking inventory of your sins at first glance. "Mother, this is Ethan," Nancy introduced me formally. Celeste looked at me, at my tie, at my shoes. I felt like a defective batch of goods about to be sent for recycling. "Ethan, operations coordinator," she said, in a voice that rustled like crisp new banknotes. "Nancy says you have an unconventional approach to problem solving. In my language, that usually means someone who ignores instructions." "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Wallen." I decided to deploy the honest sarcasm tactic. In my language, unconventional approach means I'm the only one in the office who can drink coffee near your daughter without getting a reprimand for improper coaster use. Nancy winced. Celeste froze. The air in the hallway became so thick it could be sliced. And then Celeste nodded almost imperceptibly. "Come in. Dinner is served precisely at 7 p.m. You have 32 seconds left for hand sanitization." The table was set with such symmetry that my eyes hurt. Forks lay at a 90-degree angle. The salt shaker was exactly at the table's geographic center. "Nancy mentioned you're planning a wedding," Celeste began, cutting her asparagus so carefully that it looked like open heart surgery. "I've already prepared a preliminary list of vendors whose reputations meet our standards." "We haven't discussed the list yet, Mother," Nancy interjected cautiously. "Discussion is a waste of time when the best solution is obvious," Celeste snapped. She shifted her gaze to me. "Ethan, how do you plan to optimize the family budget? Do you have an expense spreadsheet for the next 5 years?" I set down my fork. Too light, too perfect. "I have a spreadsheet," I lied, "but it only has one column. Budget for Ethan's tranquilizers. Because living with a woman who checks my monitor angle before bed is an expensive pleasure." Nancy kicked my ankle under the table, but Celeste froze mid-sip. "She checks the monitor angle?" she asked. "Every night," I confirmed, "and she rearranges my books alphabetically." "Alphabetically?" Celeste looked at her daughter with clear disapproval. "Nancy, I taught you better. Art books are sorted chronologically, and technical literature by citation index. Alphabetical order is for amateurs." Nancy flushed. "Mother, that was a temporary measure. His shelves were complete chaos." The next 20 minutes were spent with the two most organized women in the world arguing about book storage methodology. I silently ate my steak, perfectly cooked by the way, and realized that Nancy's system was just a childhood demo version of her mother's software. When dessert arrived, Celeste suddenly fell silent and looked at both of us. "You really fell in love with him," she stated, addressing her daughter. "A man who doesn't know the difference between urgent and critical in a logistics chain?" "I know the difference," I interjected, "but I also know that if Nancy stops being a tyrant for even an hour, the world won't fall apart. And she's starting to suspect that. That's my main contribution to her life." Celeste studied me for a long time. Something frighteningly close to respect flickered in her eyes. Or pity. I'm still not sure. "He's insufferable," she concluded. "But he's the only one who doesn't try to stand at attention in your presence, Nancy." That's a useful deviation. As we left, Celeste handed me a printout. "What's this?" I asked. "A fire evacuation plan for your future home," she answered without a trace of irony. "And a recipe for lemon cake. The ingredient weights are listed to the milligram. Try not to ruin at least the cake." When we stepped outside and the door closed behind us, Nancy slumped against the wall and let out a deep breath. "That was..." she hesitated. "Exemplary," I offered. "She didn't kick you out after 5 minutes. That's a historic record, Ethan." I put my arm around her, feeling her finally relax in my embrace. "You know, now I understand why you are the way you are." What way? She looked up at me, tension still sparkling in her eyes. Perfect in your imperfection. You just needed someone to mess up your spreadsheets and love you for it. Nancy snorted and adjusted my collar. Your tie is still crooked. I know, I smiled and kissed the top of her head. It's my signature. We walked to the car and I knew, if I'd survived a meeting with Central Command, married life with the tiny tyrant would be a walk in the park. The main thing is not to forget about the citation index on the bookshelf.
First day, clean shirt, lobby glass and panic, coffee in my hand like emotional damage. Then you said my name like a court date in black ink, tiny little storm by the printer ready to sink me. You fixed my badge with 2 fingers, no mercy. Said I looked lost and honestly you weren't wrong. You moved my screen half an inch like religion. I should have been scared, but I wanted you to stay too long. You say I'm inefficient, I say you're hard to please. You say I'm bad at instinct, I say you're bad at peace. Every little correction gets under my skin. You call it quality control, I call it letting you in. My badge is crooked again, come closer, fix it for me. You're 5 feet of danger in heels sharp enough to harm. My badge is crooked again, and I know you hate the view, but every time you touch my collar, I'm falling into you. Crooked badge, straight face, you're a tiny hurricane. Spreadsheet heart, sharp tongue, but I like the way you say my badge is crooked again. I did it just to see if you cross the office floor and put your hands on me. Fix it, say I'm out of line. Fix it, and stay after 5. Fix it, tell me I'm a mess. Tiny tyrant, take my tie and ruin my defense. Lunchroom, bad sandwich, you judged it like a trial. Said my turkey had no soul and my sauce looked hostile. You rubbed my nerves from the way I pull my sleeve. Said I flirt when I'm losing and look straight through me. In the meeting room, you were pure logistics fire. On your tiptoes at the board like a general made of wire. I called your cue, whole department stopped breathing. You said I crossed the line, but you were blushing when you left me. You punished me with invoices, 2 years of southern pain. Then lean over my shoulder like revenge has a perfume name. You say this is education, I say it feels like war. But when you clean my coffee cup, I only want you more. My badge is crooked again, come closer, fix it for me. You're 5 feet of danger and heels sharp enough to harm. My badge is crooked again, and I know you hate the view, but every time you touch my collar, I'm falling into you. Crooked badge, straight face, you're a tiny hurricane. Spreadsheet heart, sharp tongue, but I like the way you say my badge is crooked again. I did it just to see if you cross the office floor and put your hands on me. At the archive after dark, you finally dropped your armor. Said trust can't be controlled, but you let me stand closer. 3 men in the alley, you counted down from 3. Then I kissed the little general under city electricity. Now the office has opinions, Layla's winning bets. You misspell a board name and pretend there's no effect. Your sister tried to test me, your mother drew the plan, but I survived the whole inspection. Still your most chaotic man. My badge is crooked again, come closer, fix it for me. You're 5 feet of forever in a perfectly pressed one. My badge is crooked again, but I think we both know why. I like watching you pretend you don't wanna fix my tie. Crooked badge, straight face, you're my favorite kind of pain. Spreadsheet heart, sharp tongue, and I love the way you say my badge is crooked again. Leave it wrong or make it right. Tiny tyrant, sign the contract. Stay with me for life. Fix it, tell me I'm a mess. Fix it, kiss me at your desk. Fix it, no protocol survives. My badge is crooked again, and you're still mine.